Hi, I'm Debbie and welcome to Book and BuJo, where I talk about all things books, bullet journals, and stationery. Thank you for joining me today for my March stats and wrap-up. It's a little past time for my March wrap-up, but I read a lot of books. So with the help of my handy-dandy reading journal, and I actually did get my stats page filled out this time, and with the help of the amazing Allie from Hardback Hoarders spreadsheet that she created, and I will leave that linked down below in case you would like to check it out. She has 1-year versions and 5-year versions. I got the 5-year one, and it automatically tracks your monthly stats, your yearly stats. I believe there's quarterly on here too. Super nice and makes it so much easier to figure out your stats for the month than having to do it all by hand. Let's see if I got myself organized enough to get through this without too much trouble. So let's get started. The stats. Books read, 22. I read 22 books in March. I don't know how I did that. I actually completed my TBR, and I even read a couple extra books. I think it's because most of them were audiobooks, and all of the ebooks and physical books I had were somewhat shorter, so the long books were all on audio, and so that helped a lot to help me be able to finish all of my books. So pages read, 7,574 pages. I listened to 198 hours and 4 minutes of audiobooks, which shows you I did listen to a lot of the books. My average rating was 4.2. Very good reading month. I always like that when it's above 4. I participated in 3 readathons, so stay tuned for that wrap up because I will do that one separately. 2 readalongs, 5 book clubs. 13 of my 22 books had a diversity in them, which was great. Of course, a couple of the nonfiction ones, especially like productivity nonfiction, that's not really going to have a lot of diversity in it, but I had 1 reread. I started 7 series. Yes, my goal this year is to complete at least 12 series, and I started 7. So, well, there we go. I did continue with 4 of them, so that's helpful, and I actually completed 2 series, which is great. I completed the Slip series by David Estes and the Winterhouse series by Ben Gooderson. I did check out 15 of my books from the library, so either physically or audibly, between my public library and Hoopla and Libby through my public library. Now, I did acquire 5 books, so I bought 5 books. I have not read any of them yet. I don't actually have all of them in my hands yet, because like the Red Rising series, which I have here, I purchased those back in November and I just got them in March. So sometimes the books I get take a while to get here. So actually, I did acquire a 6th book, and that one was free, so I didn't actually pay for it, but I did read that one, and that one was one of my 5-star reads, and which was also an ARC copy that I read. So I did get 2 of my books from Amazon. 1 was from Kickstarter. 1 is from The Broken Binding, 1 from Page and Wick, and then 1 from the author. The average of all of my books was 344 pages, and I read an average of 244 pages a day. And audiobooks I listened to were an average of 9 hours a book, and that broke down into an average of just over 6 hours of audiobooks a day. My highest rated book this month was Mother of Learning by Damagaj Kurmiak. And my lowest rated book was Irish Wolfhounds. The longest book that I read was Middlemarch by George Eliot, and the shortest book that I read was Irish Wolfhounds. Middlemarch was 881 pages and Irish Wolfhound was 24 pages. Format, all of my books were novels. I didn't read any collections or short stories or novellas or graphic novels, nothing, just all novels. For how I read all my books, 2 books were just physical books, 4 books were ebooks, 5 books were audiobooks, and then the final 11 books were mixed media, so either physical and audio or ebook and audio. And that one broke down into 7 books being physical and audio and 4 books being ebook and audio. Not surprising, but I did read 11 books that were in the adult genre, 1 new adult, 6 young adult, 3 middle grade, and 1 children's book. I did own 8 of the books that I read, which is great to get those off my TBR. 1 was Gifted, which is the arc from the author, which was Heart of a Valkyrie. Loved that book. It was so good. And I did borrow 3 books, and the rest were all library books. And there was some crossover because I did have some of the mixed media ones. I had some that were ebooks that I owned, but I also listened to the audiobook from the library. The shortest book that I listened to was also Irish Wolfhounds, and that was under 10 minutes because it was only 24 pages. The longest audiobook that I listened to was Middlemarch, which was over 35 and a half hours. For star ratings, I had 5 3-star books, 13 4-star books, and 4 5-star books. So again, it was a great reading month. So I did read 17 fiction books and 5 nonfiction books. That was kind of fun. A lot of those were for the Irish Readathon though, which brings me to the countries that I read from, which is just kind of fun. I'll have the map up here for you. And I read 6 books from authors that are from Ireland, 1 from Croatia, which is this amazing book, 11 from the United States, and 4 from the United Kingdom. I read 2 books from the 1800s, 4 books from 2000 to 2010. I read 8 books from 2011 to 2020, and then 6 books from 2021 to 2024. The cover color is always kind of interesting too. I don't really pay too much attention about it, but they do have some stats in the spreadsheet from Hardback Hoarder, and so let's go over those really quick. I had 2 books with yellow covers, 3 with white, 1 red, 1 purple, 2 orange, 2 gray, 3 green, 1 brown, 4 blue, and 3 black. So definitely a wide array of colors in my reading this month. And lastly, we have genres. I read 2 classics and 1 dystopian, 9 fantasy, not a surprise there, 1 historical book, 1 literary fiction, and 1 mystery, 5 nonfiction, 1 paranormal, and 1 romance. That is my stats for March. Now let's get into the books. For my TBR, all of the dice there are colored in, so I have completed my TBR for March, which was great. Very excited about that. In the order of my TBR from March, I read Flip by David Estes, and this is the 3rd and final book in the Slip series, which is a dystopian sci-fi fantasy book. And there's been a natural disaster across the world with flooding, and basically coastlines are now underwater, so California's gone, the eastern seaboard is gone, and the capital of the revised United States of America is in St. Louis, Missouri. Which is kind of fun because it's almost a coastline of itself now because the waters came and shrunk the US in half pretty much. And they have some strict rules. So you have PopCon, which is a pretty high up company and part of the government, which is population control. And you are not allowed to have a child without their permission. You need to apply and you have to get approved before you can have a child. And in order to have a child, someone else somewhere in the country has to die. And in this series, they have what they call slips and unbees, and you have jumpers, you have diggers. Jumpers and diggers are from Canada, Mexico, trying to get into RUSA, the revised United States of America, instead of staying in their own country. So they dig under the wall or jump over and get into the country illegally. And they don't like this because they say it's a drain on all of the resources. They're taking food and other resources away from RUSA citizens. And then you have the slips, and these are the children that have slipped through the system. They usually don't get very far. One of the oldest slips that they had found was like 5 or 6 years old, so they don't last too long and pretty much terminated. And same with unbees, and these are unauthorized births, and again, they usually don't last long because they are hunted down. It's definitely a dark dystopian sci-fi book, but it is so good. So Michael is the head of PopCon at the time of the first book, and the first book is somewhat about his family and one of the children that he is taking care of, and it goes on from there. It's such a great series. I love it. Flip was a great ending. The end of it was just right. It answered all the questions I wanted it to answer, but it also left some things unanswered, so you could kind of figure them out in your head or let your imagination go without it being frustrating because they didn't answer all your questions. So I always love that about a book. So you have some things that are still a little open-ended, but not to the point that they're frustrating, and then they answer all the questions they need to answer, so you're not frustrated as well. David Estes is a great writer, and I loved this. His fantasy series are even better, and I gave this book 5 stars. Next up was The Winterhouse Mysteries, which is the third and final book in the Winterhouse series by Ben Guterson, and this book series is so cute. It's a middle grade mystery, fantasy mystery. So there's magic, there's puzzles. I love all of the word puzzles throughout. They're just so much fun. And the storyline is interesting. You do have pretty much a similar thread of the storyline that goes through all 3 books. And you get different sections of it in each book. I have heard some people say that they think all 3 books are basically the same plot, which I don't think that's true. They all involve the same people, but I feel like each of them are a little bit different, and we watch the main characters grow up throughout the 3 books, and it's just, they're so much fun. Highly recommend them. 4.5 stars on that one. Don't forget to take water breaks as needed. Next up was Middlemarch by George Eliot, and I loved this book. This was my biggest book at 881 pages. I did listen to the audiobook, I had the physical book, and I had the ebook. I had the whole gamut, depending on what time of day it was that I was listening. And I did give this one 4 stars. I thought the characters were really interesting. There was a wide variety of characters, ones that, you know, you just wanted to smack upside the head because you're just like, oh my gosh, why do you not get this? Why are you like that? And other ones you just wanted to give them a big hug or pat them on the back or a big high five. Just such a good, diverse group of personalities. I also enjoyed the writing style. It was super easy to read, even though it's a really long book. I didn't feel like it took forever to read just because the writing style was super easy and flowing and just got you from one page to the next. And it was reminiscent of a Jane Austen style of writing it's just so easy to read, and it was very enjoyable. And I also read this one for the Game of Thrones book club with Carolyn Murray Reads. Then I read The Girl in the Tower by Catherine Arden, and this is the second book in the Winter Night trilogy. I don't know why it took me so long to get to the second book, but it is so good, and I was able to borrow the audiobook and the physical book from my library, and it was just so enjoyable. I gave it 4 stars. I do think I liked the first book just a tad better, not much. I think I gave that one 4.5 to 5 stars, and this one 4 to 4.5 stars. It was still really good and very immersive. You really get into the atmosphere and the time period that they're in, and you can just like feel what the character is feeling, which I love. So this is much more of a character-driven series. I do feel like the first book had even more atmosphere though. I think it was more steeped in folklore for the first book, where the second book was a little more steeped in history. So that it didn't feel quite as atmospheric in the magical sense, I guess you could say. The first book was definitely slow paced, and this one was a little bit between slow and medium pace. So I feel like the pacing picked up, but it is a pretty slow paced series, which is typical with character driven books. But I loved seeing all the different characters from the first book growing up and what they became, because they're closer to adults now, where they were smaller children in the first book. And I just love it. The series is based on Russian folklore, and you have Baba Yaga, and this is when the Christians started coming into Russia in that area, and people were converting over to Christianity, and that created some friction with some and not necessarily with others, and there was a war brewing and just a lot of stuff going on. And I do highly recommend this story if you are a character-driven reader. If you are a plot and fast-paced driven reader, then you may want to skip this one because you may feel like it just plods along. But if you're a character-driven reader, if you know, you know, that there's just a nice sweet spot in this series for all of the characters. Next up, I read Shiftless by Amy Easterling, and this is the first book in the Wolf Rampant series. And this was a TBR jar pick for me with TBR Appley. It's not any kind of groundbreaking book or anything like that, but it was very fun. So it's a great palate cleanser. It's interesting. It's definitely steeped in more of that typical wolf world where you have the alpha wolf and they are the ones in charge and what they say goes. So it's very domineering. It's very male driven, and the society and women are definitely poo-pooed more and seen as the ones who care for the home and have babies. So if that is triggering for you, you may want to steer clear of this one. And the alpha for the pack that our main character is in is her father, and of course she is a female, and he is very controlling, very domineering. You will do as I say. These are the choices you're going to make for your life. And her and her sister, not very happy with this. They actually both run away from home at a very young age and try and make their way in the world on their own. And this story kind of picks up after both of the sisters have left home, and so we're following them as they are more adults and what happened after they left, what is happening now, and what is going on in the future. I did really enjoy it. I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought the writing style was easy to read. The content was a little triggering a bit. There is a lot of lack of equality with the characters. But a side pack of wolves is very diverse and very equal and very loving with each other, which it was nice to see that side as well. So you get both sides of the coin in this one. Next, I read Daughter of the Deep by Rick Riordan, and that was to read in middle grade. I was able to get the audiobook from my library as well as the physical book. And this is a super fun Captain Nemo retelling, sort of. It's not actually retelling 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but it's kind of continuing the story. The characters are super lovable and the story is very engaging. I almost read this through all the way in one sitting. I just had so much fun with it. So we're following a brother and sister who are in this advanced high school, basically for STEM students. So engineering for everything under the water or with the sea. So the school is a 5-year school. So basically you start 8th grade, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade up through high school. And after your 8th grade year, you move up into your 9th grade and you have to go through kind of a test of sort to see where you're gonna really fit as you get into your upper high school time. So if you're gonna be more engineering, if you're gonna be more with the animals, if you're gonna be more with navigation. It's kind of a placement test, sort of, but it's real world, hands-on, in the moment kind of thing. So they all pile onto this boat. They are off and running and heading towards their trial while the brother is still at the school. And then a lot of things happen and things get revealed and there's just so much fun. I loved it. 4.5 stars. Highly recommend it. Next was to read a Kickstarter book, and for that I drew Mother of Learning by Damagaj Kermiak. And oh my goodness, I loved this book. It was so much fun. I gave it 5 stars. I had trouble putting it down because I just wanted to keep reading it. So our main character is heading to magic school, and some things happen when he gets there and he ends up dying. But then he wakes up the next morning and it's exactly the same as when he woke up the morning before he went to school. Very strange. Something is weird here. And after about the second or third time, he realized he is in a time loop. So it's kind of a Groundhog's Day type of story. And you get to learn, and so it's a little bit lit RPG-esque, so it's not quite a role-playing game, but sort of, because you learn and grow. You can level up in your magic and your skills, and the characters are super fun and interesting. Each time he goes back, he does things slightly different so he can learn different things, and he's a very driven young man and really wants to go far and do well. And he's also in the shadow of his very famous brothers. He's got 2 older brothers that are, everyone knows who they are. So as soon as he says his last name, they're like, oh, are you related to? Yes, I am. So it's kind of that middle child syndrome of not being able to live up to the greatness of your siblings. But I just had so much fun. It seems like it's a really long book. It's 610 pages, but it went very quickly because it was just so much fun. And then to read a small book under 300 pages, I read Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. And this is about a young lady who decides to be a governess to help bring in money for the family and to kind of get out on her own. Also to kind of get away from her siblings and her mother, who don't think she can do anything, so they just do everything around the house and she has no responsibilities, which is nice, but she wants to contribute as well. And so she goes and becomes a governess. And this is somewhat based on Anne Bronte's real life because she was a governess and had some interesting families that she stayed with. And she goes through a couple of different households before she kind of finds one that she stays in for a little while. And it's about her struggles, the ups and downs of being away from home, from being a governess and learning how to be a governess on her own for the first time. Some difficult families and some manipulation by these families, and it's just a really interesting story, and it has a touch of a romance in there as well. And I definitely highly recommend this. It has a little bit of that poetic style that Anne Bronte is known for, more her poems, and it has a couple of those in here, but it's still pretty easy to read. And again, it's that same kind of time period as Middlemarch and Jane Austen books, and so it has that same kind of style and flow to it, and I definitely recommend this one as well. 4 stars. Next, I read Name of All Things by Jen Lyons, and this is the second book in the Chorus of Dragons series, and it took me a while to pick this one up because I was so intimidated. The first book was so confusing because you're going back and forth between time periods. It's not like everything's in the past and it moves to the future. You're in the past, you're in the present, you're in the future, you're back in the past, you're back in the future, you're back in the present, and it kind of goes back and forth like that. And I listened to the audiobook for that one, so I didn't have any way of going back through the book to look up like, where are we now? Who is this character again? And some of the characters have somewhat similar names, so it got definitely confusing for me. So this time I wanted to make sure I had the physical book as well as the audiobook so I could actually go along with in the book in case I got confused. And I didn't need it at all. This book was not as confusing. Some of it was a recap, but from a different point of view. So the main character is still in there, and we have some side characters that are now main characters. So he's lost his memory, he doesn't know what's happening, so they're kind of recapping what happened in the first book into the second book, which was great. I also listened to a recap of the first book by J.D. Ray Reads, and I will leave that link down below, and that was super helpful. So I listened to that before I got into this book just to catch my brain back up because it's been a couple years since I had read it. And that was very, very helpful. So thank you so much to JD Ray Reads for putting that out there. And she kind of did a recap chapter by chapter, which was so helpful. I definitely recommend it if you want to get into this series. If it's been a while since between the first and second book, or you finished the first book and you're like, okay, I am so confused, I have no idea what I just read, watch that. You'll get it. And it's really not that confusing. Like, it wasn't like, I have no idea what happened in the book. Like, it wasn't like that, but it was, you're still like, wait, what timeline are we in again? And so there's some of that if you're listening just to the audiobook. I love the snarkiness of one of the characters. So much fun. And I love the strong female characters that are in here, and the storyline is interesting. I gave it 4 stars. Again, because it was very enjoyable, and I am sad I waited so long to pick it up, so I won't wait that long before I pick up the 3rd book in the series. And I can see why this is one of JD Ray Reads' favorite series. And then I also listened to an interview with Ryan Cahill, and I will leave that linked down below as well. And that was really good. I really enjoyed it. He's one of my favorite authors. I really love his writing, and I think he's just an amazing guy. He's just a super down-to-earth, normal, regular, everyday guy, which is great. And he loves being able to talk with people who enjoy his book and want to chat with him just about anything, actually. He's also the one that got me into the Cradle series, because on his Discord channel, he had a read with me kind of book club thing where you'd go through a book and then you can all chat about it in the Discord, and we started with the first book in the Cradle series, so that was fun. And that was Unsold by Will White. The last book on my TBR was Dare to Believe by Becky Dvorak, and this one was really good. By the time I finished this book, it was 3.5 stars. The first chapter was a little slow going, mainly because it was all information I knew already. The first chapter was really long, so it takes up a good at least 1/3 of the book. It's hard when it's all one chapter is that long. And it was more of like a recap or basic building blocks of faith and believing in God and what God has done for us. Then we get into the next set of chapters and the rest of the book, and it's more about her life and the things that she's done and gone through, and testimonials from all of the people. So Becky Dvorak is a healer. She is a prayer warrior, and her gifts from the Spirit are healing and miracles through prayer. And so she tells a bunch of stories of all of the different children. Her and her husband are missionaries in Guatemala, and they helped to run an orphanage that had a lot of children. So a lot of these kids had a lot of troubles and issues. They cared for all of these children with a lot of love and brought some healing to some of them as well. And so it was those stories, but also she's been to Africa and America and a whole bunch of other places, and it's just a bunch of testimonials of faith healing. So Dare to Believe is the true power of faith to walk in divine healings and miracles. It's very inspirational, and I did enjoy it. So that was all the books from my TBR-opoly game that I read, but I definitely read more in March than that. And one of them was Heart of Valkyrie, and that is by Melanie Karsak, and it is the first book in the Vinland to Valhalla series. And this is a great start to the series. We have our main character, a young child at the time, who has received her mother's gifts of prophecy, so she's able to see visions of things that are to come. And her mother has passed away, so it's just her and her dad. And her dad decides to get remarried, and that's when things go a little awry. So we get to know Freydis, our main character, quite well in this story, and her concerns as well as the powers that she has. She, of course, goes through ups and downs living in a Viking world, and she learns and grows, and by the end of the book, she kind of comes into her own and starts to become not only a great prophetess, but also somewhat of a warrior and an inspiration to others. Now for some book clubs. For the Backlist Book Club, I did read The Girl on the Mountain, but I read that in February. The Backlist Book Club is with Covers with Cassidy. For the Big Book Club, or the Game of Tomes with Carolyn Marie Reads, we read Middlemarch by George Eliot, and I did finish that one. And then for the Book and BuJo Book Club, we read Kingfall for February and March, and I did complete that one in February, and that is by David Estes, and I will have a review video coming out for that book for all of my thoughts for Kingfall, which I loved. I gave that one 5 stars. Such a good book. I can't wait to start reading Dragonfall in April. And then for the BuJo Buddies Book Club with Jashi Curran, we read Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. And I did read that one. I gave that one 4 stars. And that one is a productivity book. It teaches you how to take information and condense it down, and then condense it down again, and make it easy to find later when you actually need it. Because a lot of times you're like, ooh, that's really interesting, but you don't need it yet. But a year down the line, you're like, oh, I remember reading that article about this thing that would be super helpful right now. And what was it called? Where did I find that? He teaches you how to do that, how to keep a hold of those articles, drill it down to some main points and some takeaways from it, and where to find that information later. It would have been very helpful in my previous job. I wish I would have had it then. And as someone who always has like 500 tabs open on my computer at one time, stresses people out, but I know pretty much exactly where each tab in each window is. But it stresses other people out. That would have been really helpful, because I would have been able to close a lot of those tabs and still be able to find the information that I needed from it. Lastly is the Catch-Up Book Club with Becca and the Books, and we read A Little Hatred, which is the first book in the Age of Madness series by Joe Abercrombie. And I did really enjoy this book as well. This is quite a few years in the future from the First Law trilogy, and so we're following some familiar characters, and then also their descendants, so like their offspring and the next generation after the characters in the First Law trilogy. And it's very enjoyable so far. Readalongs. We have the Wheel of Time read-along with Sandra from Got a Thing for Things, and we read The Path of Daggers in March, and I am still enjoying the Wheel of Time series, and apparently this is the slog section, and I'm not really feeling it. I'm still enjoying it. Again, I like the slow pace, journeying, character building type of stories, so I don't have any issues with it. They're not necessarily my top favorite books in the series, but they're still getting 4 stars, even if it's a lower 4-star than some of the other books. And I'm also continuing Around the Disc in 800 with Literary Diversions, and we read Night Watch and The Wee Free Min. That one's just fun to say. So the Night Watch, again, is the 29th book in the Discworld series, and we are following the City Watch. And this one is all about Commander Vimes, which I'm a Commander Vimes fan, so I definitely enjoyed this book, and we have some time travel and consequences from that, and it was just super fun. I really enjoyed it. And then we had The Wee Free Min, and that one is book number 30 in the Discworld series, and it is the first book in the Tiffany Aching series. So we have Tiffany Aching, and she is coming to realize she may actually be a witch. And she can see the Wee Free Min when others can't. And she goes on a little adventure and to find her brother, who has been stolen by some bad fairies. And she is on the hunt to find him. And the Wee Free Min help her out, and the story goes from there. Then I read quite a few other books, but I will save that for another video. Otherwise, this one will be over an hour long. So for the Readathons, I did participate in Realm-A-THON with Covers with Cassidy, and basically all of the books that I read in March were part of Realm-A-THON. I also participated in Spring into Reading-Athon, and that is with Completely Melanie. And lastly, I participated in the Irish Readathon, and that is with Leanne Rose and Words of Clover. So So how did your March reading go? Did you participate in any of the readathons that I did? I would love to find out if you have read any of the books that I read this month, and if you did, what you thought of them. And if you have made it this far in the video, leave a shamrock emoji in the comments in honor of the Irish Readathon and March. And until next time, keep reading. Bye!